Carlos Rodon has officially been added to the Giants roster on this 2-year, $44 million deal. Just what does his upside bring to the San Francisco Giants rotation? Where do they now rank in the league if everybody's healthy? And what do they still need to accomplish with opening day fast approaching? We'll talk about all of that next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide episodes every day now that the lockout is over, Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, so check us out there if you haven't already. And coming up on today's show, we are going to talk about the craziness around the league, the Giants being involved. They made a signing last week. It was officially announced finally today. They add left-handed starting pitcher Carlos Rodon, coming off a monster season in 2021, a breakout campaign for a player who was formerly the third overall pick in 2014. Spent his entire career with the White Sox, and it all came together for him last year. There continued to be some injury concern. His shoulder had fatigue as the season wore on. He had only thrown 7 2/3 innings the season prior, and so that's the explanation that's been given for that. But his velocity tanked, and his shoulder was tired. But when he was right, he looked like one of the most dominant pitchers in the game. So it's a big upside play for the Giants. So we'll talk about him. We'll talk about their rotation and where it stands and what the Giants still have to do. And all of this in the context of the league kind of going nuts right now. At the time of this recording, Matt Olson has been traded from the A's to the Braves. We had a blockbuster last night with Josh Donaldson being traded to the Yankees. So it has been a frenzy. It took a minute for it to get going. But there's been a lot of activity. Where there hasn't been a lot of activity is in the position player free agent market. It's not just the strength of the remaining free agent class. It's basically where all the good players are. You really can't find any other really good starting pitchers. It's all position players. And that's why it's good that the Giants have done their heavy lifting. Their rotation kind of on paper 1 through 5 is set. When you look at Logan Webb, Carlos Rodon, and that massive upside I mentioned, he slots in at the front of that rotation along with Logan Webb. And then you've got a really good kind of 3 through 5 in DeSclafani, Wood, and Cobb. There's no holes in that rotation. And if everyone's healthy, it's one of the better rotations in the game. But, I mean, that's famous last words. If everyone's healthy, you cannot assume that at all. And the Giants are probably going to be careful with workload management as they were last year. It was a big part of their success was not overworking anybody and not being overly reliant on anybody and having enough depth that when guys inevitably go down, their replacements aren't going to kill you. And actually you can get some upside out of them. And there's a variety of different types of arms you can bring in. Like last year, Logan Webb started the year. He was supposed to be kind of that 6th guy out of the top 5. And then Alex Wood went down with a back injury, and Logan Webb kind of filled in. And he ended up being the Giants' best pitcher. So coming into this year, the plan is going to be really similar. There's those 5 at the top that I just mentioned. And then immediately after that, it was a little bit murky. You have Tyler Beede, who's out of minor league option. So I think he finds a way to be in that bullpen probably on opening day. And beyond that, you've got Sammy Long, who would fill a similar role to what he did last year. You've got Kervin Castro, who pitched out of the bullpen last year, but has also historically been a starter in the minors at times. And you've also got, I'm completely blanking, Sean Jelly, who's been added to the 40-man roster. So that was still a little bit thin, and I thought they needed to continue to add. And add they have. Yesterday, we heard from the pitcher himself, Carlos Martínez, that he is signing with the San Francisco Giants. It is reportedly a minor league deal, but worth $2.5 million if he makes the major league roster. And there's another $1.5 million available in incentives. Now, Carlos Martínez is not far removed from being one of the better pitchers in the National League. From basically 2015 through 2019, he was always in the low threes with his earned run average. He did transition to the bullpen over the last couple of years of that span. He became the Cardinals' closer. He had an elite fastball and an elite ground ball rate. He was just a really, really quality pitcher with the Cardinals. But injuries have derailed him, and he has really fallen off the last couple of years. He had a long bout of COVID. He has asthma, and he thinks it caused him to kind of not do so well there. But and then in 2021, he just dealt with injuries and poor performance. But anyway, he joins the Giants as part of that next layer of depth. And it's a very low-risk move because they don't even have to give him the money unless he makes the major league roster. So if he comes into camp and it's just not there, then they move on. But if the stuff is there and they believe they can help build him back up to being somewhat anywhere near like he used to be, then he earns his contract and can be a part of the mix. It's also a minor league deal, so he can, I believe, start the season in the minors, and then if they need him, they can bring him up and he could be a part of the mix that way. And then also this morning, the Giants announced that they had signed right-handed pitcher Jakob Junis, who spent his entire career with the Royals. And Junis is somewhat of an interesting guy as well, particularly because he is arbitration eligible through 2023. So it's a 1-year contract, but he can be retained in 2023 if the Giants want to bring him back, and he has a minor league option. So this is like the exact type of move that makes sense for the Giants, given what I was saying. Their rotation is kind of filled out, but Martínez could start the season in AAA. Junis could be optioned to AAA to start the year, and they're just there and ready and waiting if the Giants need them, if there's an injury in the rotation or whatever the case may be. These are the flexible type of secondary layers of depth that the Giants needed. And so I don't think they're done in this area. I believe that they could continue to add depth in this manner, but these moves make a lot of sense given the overall context of their pitching staff. So coming up next, I want to switch our attention to the offensive side of things because it's a very different conversation, and it's one in which we say there is still room to make a major addition. Whereas on the pitching side, I don't think major additions are part of the cards anymore, given the big-time addition of Rodon. So we'll talk about who those players are, and later we're going to talk about a key waiver claim that the Giants also made over the weekend in just a minute. But first, it's that time of year that I've pretty much given up on all of my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. Imagine that. Have you tried the Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. They're the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar, they're a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Sounds delicious, sounds like a dessert. Well, go to Built.com, scroll down to their macros chart. You'll be blown away. High protein, low calorie, high fiber, low carb. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories and just 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, as promised, we're going to switch our attention to the position player side of things. It's really interesting when we're looking at a kind of roster building theory for the Giants and just the state of their roster. the pitching side is one thing and the position player side is another thing entirely. And so we're going to look at who are the remaining bats and who makes sense for the San Francisco Giants moving forward. There's been a Seiya Suzuki rumor about him signing elsewhere, not with the Giants, but that has yet to be verified. But the frenzy is on in Major League Baseball. There is a lot going on. And by the time you're hearing this, there may have already been more major moves that affect the Giants in one way or another. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Locked On MLB Prospects. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow, including those in the Giants system. That show, Locked On MLB Prospects, is free and available wherever you get podcasts. So yeah, I want to switch our attention to the position player side. I'm forced to be updating Twitter as I'm talking here, just to see if there's anything major that has happened between when I last checked and now. What I will say is that the move for the Braves to trade for Matt Olson, the first baseman from the A's, obviously, may certainly influences the Freddie Freeman free agency. And the Dodgers have been linked to Freddie Freeman. So I know this is a Giants show, but what the Dodgers do does influence where the Giants stand. I'm not saying the Giants are going to make a reactionary move, but if the Dodgers sign Freddie Freeman, that's noteworthy. And the odds of that went up substantially with the Braves trading for Matt Olson. So the position player side of the free agent market remains robust. Freddie Freeman is, along with Carlos Correa, at the very top of that free agent list. But in the infield, there's also Trevor Story, who to me remains a really intriguing player, especially if he's willing to move to the outfield. I have concerns about his arm, as everybody does, I think. He had an elbow injury in 2021, and it really affected his throwing and hurt his defense. So if he's someone who might need Tommy John surgery, potentially, and I've heard there's some fear about that in the industry, then that's a big deal. But he's still out there, along with Freeman and Correa in the infield, also Anthony Rizzo as some of the big names out there. And then in the outfield, and then also kind of utility players who are infielders / outfielders or DHs / infielders / outfielders, there's also still a lot of quality. There's Kris Bryant, of course, Giants fans very familiar there. There's Kyle Schwarber, who to me stands out as a possible fit for the Giants if they're not so focused on right-handed hitting as we thought that they might be. Farhan Zaidi said the other day that their target doesn't have to be a right-handed hitter, despite the kind of media narrative that they would be looking for a right-handed bat. I think right-handed makes a lot of sense, given they lose Buster Posey, they lose Kris Bryant to free agency thus far. And so when you look at that projected lineup, I recall saying on Friday that if you look at their outfield against left-handed pitching, I only see two potential bats in Darren Ruff and Austin Slater, and then otherwise you're going to have a lefty out there. But I was kind of forgetting that Mauricio Dubon is still on this 40-man roster, and he's out of minor league options. So it is in play, I suppose, that you could put Dubon back in center field, which was the plan going into 2021, actually, against left-handed pitching. So then you would have Ruff in left, I suppose, and Dubon in center and Slater in right against left-handed pitching. And I think that could work still. I haven't completely given up on Mauricio Dubon. And in fact, somebody in a mailbag was telling me that he's on Instagram putting out workout videos and that he looks good. So don't forget about him. He is still on this roster, and something has to give. He could be a DFA candidate if they need roster spots, but he's still in play there for that spot. But that's the thing. So then if they go with that or something like that, then they could add a left-handed bat. And when you look at what does their outfield look like against right-handed pitching, and of course most pitchers are right-handed, so this is the strong side of the platoon, meaning they play more often. Well, currently they have Lamont Wade Jr. and Mike Yastrzemski and also Steven Duggar. I've been saying that Duggar is out of options, but I've been informed that he may actually be the Giants may have actually gotten one of those options back. So roster resource says that Duggar is out of options, but he may actually have one remaining. But you could make a case, Duggar and Dubon kind of in that same case where they may or may not be in play for that kind of opening day starting role in a platoon in the outfield, which does, I think, give them the flexibility to make an addition in that position. And also the DH is in play, and that guys can kind of cycle through that designated hitter spot. So all I'm trying to say is I do believe Farhan Zaidi when he says their addition, if they make one, doesn't have to be left-handed or right-handed. So who are the options? Like I said, Bryant is out there. Kyle Schwarber I like quite a bit, and he can play first base, he can play outfield, and he can, of course, DH, which might be his, quote, best position, given that he's not a particularly strong defender at those other positions. Seiya Suzuki is still out there. There's a report out of Yahoo Japan, I think, that he may have signed with the Padres, but that has yet to be verified, and I'm not going to believe that until I see it verified by other reporters. It's also the writing is in Japanese and we're all translating here. So I don't know. We'll see about that. Nick Castellanos kind of fits into that. Is he an outfielder? Is he a DH kind of mold? Michael Conforto, interesting left-handed bat in the outfield. And then there's the likes, the lesser known players or lesser impact players like Tommy Pham, who I like quite a bit as a bargain buy. Jorge Soler, Jock Peterson, Eddie Rosario, Andrew McCutchen. I don't see all of those players as fits, but on the higher end, I do think that the Giants probably come away with one of these players. And whether it's Schwarber or Seiya Suzuki, I like those guys, and I like Conforto, and I like Tommy Pham. And Trevor Story, if he's willing to play the outfield. There's just a lot of choices is what I'm trying to convey. And so the Giants can kind of pivot if the market goes a certain way. They can kind of wait out the market. They could jump the market. It just remains to be seen what direction they go here. But they've got, tons of potential money to spend. We don't know what they aim for their final payroll to be. Right now, they stand at about $147 million when you're counting arbitration estimates for guys who have yet to receive their salaries for 2021. There's still some players who are ARB eligible but haven't agreed to new deals yet. Eventually will, but we just don't know what the cost is going to be. And then there's players who are not yet eligible for arbitration as well. That's all being accounted for here, and they would stand at about $147 million. Remember, the first luxury tax threshold isn't until $230 million now. So I'm not saying the Giants are going to go up to that level, but they've got room to add if they so desire. Let's just say that. So coming up next, we'll continue to discuss this, and I want to talk about the key waiver claim that the Giants made over the weekend, which continues to build out this roster in a way that is under the radar but critical, and a huge reason why they won 107 games was this type of roster construction. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But first, it's that time of year, again, as college basketball's tournament is finally upon us. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, BetOnline.net is the #1 source for all your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Baseball odds are also going up. I saw just today they've got odds for MVP and Rookie of the Year up on BetOnline as well. So check that out. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, as promised, we are going to continue to look at the Giants roster, a key move that they made over the weekend, kind of under the radar. It's not going to be attention grabbing. It's one of those under the radar moves that ultimately, I think, is a huge reason why they were able to win 107 games. And it's a staple of Farhan Zaidi. And a lot of these moves, other teams don't make these kind of moves. And I think it comes back to bite them. And what that move is a small little move. The Giants made a waiver claim let's see, his last name is Godoy, and he's a catcher. He was formerly with the Mariners organization last season, Jose Godoy, and he's a left-handed hitting catcher who immediately joins the 40-man roster. So under the radar move, but the Giants absolutely needed a third catcher on the 40-man roster to go along with Joey Bart and Curt Casali. So the issue that I have, the reason they needed this third catcher was because, I mean, first of all, if somebody gets hurt, what do? Who's the replacement at that position? And secondly, Joey Bart is unproven. And I'm just saying, what happens if he struggles like he struggled in 2020 with the Giants or anything like that? I mean, he was unplayable. And if you had other options, it would make sense to send Bart down and call somebody else back up. And the Giants didn't really have that upper minors catching depth that they absolutely need in order to prevent a situation where you're just getting a black hole at a position and maybe relying on Curt Casali to just be an everyday catcher, which, let's be honest, there aren't even everyday catchers. Catchers get a lot of rest, generally speaking. And so anyway, claiming a catcher who was just bumped off a 40-man roster from the Mariners, the Giants add him to their 40-man roster yesterday. And he's a left-handed hitter. I have a hard time finding minor league platoon splits, but I imagine he's a better hitter against right-handed pitching than he is against left-handed pitching because he's a left-handed hitter. And so I think that that's a crucial element to why he's a good fit here, because say Joey Bart struggles or Curt Casali gets injured, then you can have a righty catcher and a lefty catcher, and you can kind of optimize their at-bats that way. So Godoy also has minor league options, and so he can be sent down, he can be called up, he can kind of bounce around. And they absolutely needed that. I'm thinking they probably need to continue to stockpile upper minors catching depth. But this is a good start, and it just kind of raises the floor, is I guess what I'm saying. So in corresponding moves to these additions to the 40-man roster, Giants didn't announce Rodon until this morning. And then, of course, they signed Junis this morning. So then they had two players beyond 40 on their 40-man roster. So they had to make a couple of corresponding moves. And they DFA'd Caleb Berriger, the lefty reliever, and also Hunter Harvey, a righty reliever that they had claimed earlier in the offseason off waivers from the Orioles. So Berriger, notably debuted in 2020 and was kind of a breakout performer after some early struggles in that short season. But the story for me is that right when the sticky stuff got banned in 2021, immediately Caleb Berriger got sent down. And his whole thing is like high spin fastballs at the top of the zone. And as soon as the sticky stuff got banned, they sent him off. He struggled in the minor leagues, and we never heard from him again. I think he had one brief call-up where he didn't even pitch. And the fact that he gets DFA'd today, I'm speculating. I do not have inside information, and I don't know for sure, but it sure seems like Caleb Berriger was probably one of these guys who used the ultra sticky stuff, and that's part of what was enabling him to have success. So it is sad because for the longest time, he was able to use these substances, which a lot of pitchers were using around the game, and it helped him find major league success and certainly minor league success. And then as soon as it gets banned, he may be a victim of, I get it, level the playing field. But it's sad, and I'll be interested to see what ends up happening with Berriger. He was a likable pitcher in this Giants organization, so I wish him nothing but the best, and I hope that I'm wrong and it has nothing to do with the sticky stuff, but it is just notable, the whole timeline of how that went down, and that he was just like a part of this team and then never to be heard from again after that happened. So anyway, that is all the time we have for today. We'll be back tomorrow. We're back to 5 days a week. And we're just going to continue breaking down the state of the Giants and also looking around the league and, how the Giants get involved with this kind of frenzied market. So I can't wait to be with you again then. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On MLB. Paul Francis Sullivan, please call him Sully, brings you his unique perspective on the major leagues past and present. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out so much, so thank you in advance, and thank you to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. Stay Locked On Giants.